So, Rosary and Real Estate event number 6. This is Promises of the Rosary. We're going to go through the 15 promises of the Rosary that were given to us by our Blessed Mother. And then we're going to talk about passive income strategies. But as you guys know, I always start with the real estate stuff first, typically, because it's a little bit more digestible. Now, it's great because this call is full of a bunch of people that are pretty, on the Kool-Aid for the faith and for Jesus Christ. So I think it's not necessarily too undigestible when we get into the rosary side of things, but we are going to start with the real estate stuff and we'll kind of work our way through. But before we get into that, let me start going through here. I'm just going to do a quick recap. And I do this on every single call, so some of this might be repetitive. You guys might have heard this before. But what is Rosary and Real Estate, right? It's a community that strives to build both generational wealth and spiritual poverty. And we feel we do that by building generational wealth through real estate investing. That's our biggest talking point. Obviously, we talk about investing in real estate. And then we also talk about the Rosary and we talk about our Christian faith and building that spiritual poverty, being spiritually poor, knowing that although we're accumulating assets, and we're striving for generational wealth, we're striving for cash flow. At the end of the day, we have the ability to detach from those things and truly just be in tune and in touch with Jesus Christ and all of our saints, knowing that that is the pathway to the ultimate paradise, not just Aruba, but to heaven, right? So in Rosary and Real Estate, we have 3 pillars. The first pillar, spiritual poverty. The second, generational wealth. And the third is family and friendship. The first pillar is spiritual poverty, which means, again, like we kind of talked about, the big focus here is bringing Catholics and all Christians together to grow deeper in their love for Christ. Through Rosary and Real Estate, we do launch courses on saints, on prayer, on overall living a Christ-centered life. We have a course right now that's been out for about a month. It's called the Rare 21-Day Challenge. It's understanding and praying the Rosary. Some of you guys may have done that, but you can find that on the school page. And then we also are going to have an Advent Challenge coming out, which I'm going to talk about shortly. The second pillar is generational wealth. Again, we believe that real estate investing is a key to financial freedom. This community will give you access to such things such as how to invest in real estate, courses on investing in real estate, buy and hold real estate, flipping, wholesaling, and more. And obviously, we do these webinars once, if not going to be more than once a month. So you'll have a lot of information coming that way. And then the third pillar, family and friendship, right? One of my favorite, Bible verses, especially now starting this community, is Matthew 18:20. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there I am in the midst of them. And this community is really built on its members. We're all committed to helping each other and growing in that side of faith and helping wherever we can. As I mentioned, we're going to be offering up a rosary for some of our rare members today as well. So those are really the 3 pillars that we really built this entire company on. And again, just to kind of say on this, like Rosary and Real Estate, it's a non-for-profit. My investing stuff that I do within D&D Equities, that's where I really make a living. Rosary and Real Estate was really more so built just to build a community of people that want to achieve both of those things in generational wealth and spiritual poverty. A few housekeeping items before we get into this. The Rare Community School. So about a couple months ago, I think it's been about 3 months, we opened up the Rare School. It's a school page. Alex Hermosi, this is like his platform. It's really user-friendly. It's awesome. We do this. It's a totally free community. We talk about the real estate. We talk about the rosary. I got to admit, I have to be a little bit better on posting a little more daily on the school page. But there's also an opportunity to connect with other Christians and real estate investors alike through the school page. I do a weekly coffee hour every Friday at 7:45 a.m. Sitting, or actually, I think it's at 7:30 a.m. I'm sitting in front of the computer with my doppio. If you don't know what a doppio is, it's a double espresso, and I always do it over ice. But it's that doppio. I'm sitting there. We're talking real estate. We're talking, faith. So anybody that wants to come on, those are always just open to join. We do group rosaries as we do on these calls. And then you also get updates on Rosary and Real Estate events. But again, it's totally free. And as you can see here, this is an updated screenshot. We have 84 members. Once we hit 100 members, I'm doing a massive giveaway through the Rosary and Real Estate community through the school page. So get on there. If you're not on there, once we hit 100 members, whoever's on there is going to be entered into that giveaway. All right, good to see my boy Clifford on the call. Next, the Rare Instagram page. Again, just promoting a few things here. Follow us on IG. We've been growing pretty steadily on the followers on that one as well. Again, we're posting about real estate. We're posting about faith. And updates on events coming up is all posted in there. And again, once we hit 1,000 followers on the Instagram, there's also going to be a sick giveaway. And these are 2 separate giveaways. I love giveaways, guys. All right. Last Rosary and Real Estate event, we did a charitable donation. We've done this every single Rosary and Real Estate event to Good Counsel Homes. Good Counsel Homes is a organization that focuses on bringing mothers into their homes after they're having children when the father isn't around. It's very big on pro-life. It's a great pro-life organization, so it's always good to kind of help them out. But last Rosary and Real Estate event, we raised $184.50, and they write a nice little note. They talk about Charlize here, and I could forward this to everybody. I'll post it in the school page so we could read it a little more in detail if you want. But basically, she had her, preborn baby when she was 35 weeks pregnant. It says here, Charlize slept on various friends' couches. She was terrified of going to a dangerous city shelter, and she called Good Counsel Homes. They immediately brought her in. They get her back on her feet. They get her back to work while they take care of the child. There's a daycare portion kind of involved in the organization as well. So it's just a really, really good foundation. Like I said, I'll post this in the school page so you guys can see. But every single Rosary and Real Estate event, we do a charitable donation fund. I'm always open to reviewing different organizations as well and picking another one for, the charitable donation. But this one's very pro-life, and, we're very big on pro-life here. So Good Counsel Homes, if you want to donate to that, I will be dropping my Venmo at the end for anybody that wants to send a donation. Moving on. Couple more, and then we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of this, I promise. A big thing on this, guys, is we need to be taking up space. Again, we really want to grow the Rosary and Real Estate community. And there's a few ways to do this. I touched on this last month as well. Church bulletins. I'm happy to say we are in the church bulletins, guys. We are in 6 church bulletins, 3 in New Jersey, 2 in Pennsylvania, 1 in Virginia. It was very cool. My boy Clifford was actually at Mass with me a couple weeks ago when I saw it in the bulletin at my church for the first time. It was very, very cool. So it's in there. I know a girl in Philly who actually took a picture of it and sent it to me. She was like, oh my gosh, like I see your stuff's in there. So that's really cool. We need to start taking up space and, pushing people to the website, pushing people to join the school page. Eventually, I want to get into billboards. Like I said, I think it would be so sick to just be driving down 95 and see a billboard that says pray the rosary, another one that says buy real estate, and then the third one that just says Rosary and Real Estate. I feel like that'd be awesome. Boosted posts on social media, podcast. If anybody knows any podcasts that I have the ability to promote Rosary and Real Estate, please send them my way. Radio station sponsorship. We got to increase merch, and we got to start repping the merch. And again, word of mouth. So if you guys know anybody that would be interested in joining the Rosary and Real Estate community, that would be interested in joining these webinars, please share it with them. Cool. Next, a few upcoming events, like I mentioned. 12/15 is our next Rosary and Real Estate event. We are still a TBD on the topic. So if anybody has any that they would like to potentially talk about, feel free to send it over to me. I'll review it. The Rosary and Real Estate 08 is going to be on January 22nd. We're going to talk about cardinal virtues and virtual real estate investing. February 26th, we're going to talk about the lives of the saints and laundromat investing. I have 2 guest speakers for these as well. And then March, I still have a TBD on there, although I may get my accountant to come out and speak since tax season will be coming up at that. All right. Advent is upon us. And I'm sorry that this is a little long-winded. As I'm going through this, I'm like, wow, I have a lot of preemptive slides for you guys. But Advent is upon us. Advent starts November 30th. Advent is the season of preparation for the coming of Christ, right? So obviously it leads up to the Nativity, to Christmas, to the birth of Christ. But it's also a foreshadowing of the second coming. So Advent's 4 weeks, wraps around hope, peace, joy, and love. And we are going to be doing a Advent challenge, which will be posted on the Rosary and Real Estate School community. It'll also be posted on YouTube. It'll also be posted on the Frankie D'Astoli podcast. So this is something that I'm going to be working on over the course of the next month. And every single day, we are going to be doing a reflection. We're going to do a scripture reading that's based off of either hope, peace, or joy, or love, based off of those 4 weeks. And then we're going to do a reflection on that scripture as well. So you can catch that totally free to sign on. If you're a member of Rare, you're going to be able to see the videos through the Rosary and Real Estate School, or you can go to YouTube, or you can go to Spotify. If you did the Rosary and Real Estate 21-day challenge, it's a very similar setup. All right, and then pretty much the last thing before we get started here, guys, Rosary and Real Estate, this is the giveaway for today, okay? So we do a giveaway every single time. At the very end, I'm going to pull up the wheel of names. We're going to drop it. Someone's going to get picked. But in the giveaway this time, we have a few items. Number 1 is Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright. Phenomenal book on really being strategic and how you're placing your money and how to save on taxes and how to really kind of understand the system, because that's really what it is. It's basically a system. If you're not playing it, you're getting played by it. The Secret of the Rosary by Louis de Montfort. This is by far one of the most top tier books of all time. It's very, very short. It's about 130 pages. And a lot of the stuff that we're actually pulling from today comes from this book, which is exciting. A Roman Catholic gear World War II replica rosary. This was in the giveaway last time. It's the exact rosary that I pray with. It is like this military grade. Roman, if you don't have this rosary already, I want you to win this because A, it's from Roman Catholic gear, but B, it's a military one as well. And you obviously haven't been in the military. It's awesome. But what's that?
I feel like it's calling me.
I think it is, bro. I definitely think it is. Believe it or not, the US government actually issued these out in World War II. Like, where are we now that this is not happening anymore? But at the end of the day, this company makes the replicas of it, and it's really, really awesome. It's very durable. I mean, my son bites on this all day long, basically, and it's that thing ain't moving. So that's always good. And then last but not least, a Pray the Rosary by Real Estate crew neck, which is, in my opinion, one of the freshest pieces of merch that we have out right now. So all of this is going to be in the giveaway, and that's going to be going out at the end when we do the name draw. All right, without further ado, after that very, very long-winded intro, sorry about that, let's get into the actual real estate side of this, right? So is real estate invested truly passing, right? Everybody says like, oh, I want to be a real estate investor. I want passive income. Well, it depends, right? That's really the short answer to it. And what we're going to see here is I put together a little chart of kind of a few different strategies that you could use for real estate investing. And we're going to determine what is actually needed for those strategies. So if you're looking at this chart here, the very first one is flipping houses, right? And let's talk about that. Project management is contractors, right? Managing contractors, managing a work schedule, doing all of those things in regards to getting material ordered. Does flipping require that? Yes, it does. Property management is in regards to tenants, right? Managing a tenant, getting them into the unit, making sure they're paying rent on time, paying the mortgages on time, all of that stuff. Flipping does not require that. Does it require an attorney and accountant? Yes. For the most part, yes. Right now, you could do some of these things, without those people. Do I recommend that? Absolutely not. But they do require an attorney or accountant, which usually means they require some communication, okay? The second strategy is a BRRRR strategy, which stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. Now, the BRRRR strategy, because you are doing renovation within it, it does require project management. Because you are renting the property out and it becomes a stable buy and hold property, you're going to hold it for the, at least foreseeable future. It does require property management. And yes, you do need an attorney and you do need an accountant for both of these things, especially an accountant, I will say that. Short-term rentals. Does it require project management? Does it require contracting? Possibly, right? I categorize that as a maybe. You could buy a turnkey, short-term rental in the Poconos and not do a thing to it. That's possible. Or you might buy another unit that you are going to renovate, that you are then eventually going to, utilize before you start renting it out to your tenants. So that's kind of a maybe. It could not. Does it require property management? Yes. And that requires a lot of property management, more than the BRRRR strategy, because the BRRRR strategy, most of the time you're renting it out and it's a yearly lease. Short-term rentals are in fact short-term, right? So overall, you are pretty much renting it out for 3, 4, 5 days, and then you're rotating to a new person. So that requires a lot of hands-on property management unless you hire it out. And then an attorney and accountant, yes, you would want to use those for short-term rentals as well. Turnkey rentals. Now, turnkey rentals might be a little bit different for what people maybe don't necessarily understand, but turnkey rentals means that the property is already renovated. You do not need to do any renovations. You are buying it turnkey, and then you're getting a tenant in there and renting it out. So for turnkey, project management is not necessarily required, but property management is, right? Because you are renting that out to a tenant. So you are going to have to deal with, whatever the tenant needs at that point. And then again, attorney and accountant, yes, that's going to be yes for every single one. The last one here is what we're really going to talk in on today. Lending. You lend money on a deal. Does it require you to be hands-on in project management? No. Does it require you to be hands-on in property management, dealing with tenants? Also no. Do you need an attorney or accountant? Yes. But what you can see here is by looking at this chart here, there is only one of all of these strategies that have 2 no's in them. And those no's are no on the project management, no on the property management, and that is correlated to lending. So we're going to talk about real estate investing strategies in a passive way through lending. And just to kind of throw it out there, lending is by far the most passive way to invest in real estate. Now, all of these other strategies, I'll just say this before we move on, all of these other strategies can become more passive. So if you're, doing the BRRRR strategy, which is my personal favorite, I BRRRR all day. That's basically what I do. Project management, you could hire out a GC to run your project management, right? So you could take that off your plate and you can make it more passive. Property management, you could hire a property manager to make it more passive. However, the buck still stops with you. If you're going over budget, that's your problem for the most part. If your tenant stops paying, that's your problem for the most part, right? So there's still, even though you could hire people out to do certain tasks, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be easier in regards to having to make decisions. Whereas lending, project management, property management, you don't even touch it. You don't have to deal with any of that because you give it to an operator to take care of. Does all of that make sense? Any questions on this initial chart before we move on? Cool. So one thing I want to make note here is there is a trade-off in real estate investing, and that trade-off is time versus money. So let's kind of break this down here. So passive investing through passive investing through lending is, and becoming a lender is a great option for someone who's looking to invest in real estate, but maybe doesn't have either the time, the experience, the connections, or the resources, the market nearby, or the bandwidth to manage tenants and contractors. And I want everybody to think about this because I know before we were getting into this, there were a few people that kind of were like, yeah, like I have some money, but I don't really know what to do with it. These are good questions to ask yourself. Do you have the time? If you work a 9 to 5 and you're pretty busy and you have a family and you have a lot of things going on and your kids have a lot of activities going on, you might not necessarily have the time, right? Or are you kind of self-employed and you're working for yourself and you can make your own hours? Then maybe you do have the time. Do you have the experience? Do you have real estate investing experience? Do you have contracting experience? Do you have management experience? Do you have connections and resources such as real estate agents and wholesalers to help on acquisitions, such as attorneys and accountants to help on that back end stuff? Do you have a market nearby? And I think honestly, this is maybe the one that's probably most prominent to a lot of people. And I know Brandon being on the call, like he's in Staten Island. Staten Island is one of the hardest places to invest in real estate. Like New York,
A lot
prices
of so expensive, dude.
it's so expensive, bro. These prices are through the roof, right? It's like it's just to get one deal, you need to have hundreds of thousands of dollars basically saved up, or you need to get creative, right? So it's hard in a lot of these areas that are, and anybody that's really in New Jersey and New York, it's very challenging. So that's definitely a common one as well. And then again, the bandwidth to manage the tenants, the contractors, is that something that you even want to do? So these are all questions to ask yourself. And if you're saying, no, I don't have the time, I don't have the experience, I don't have the bandwidth, I don't have the market, then you might be falling into the category of like, it might make sense for me to be a kind of a lender, and that'll be my into real estate investing. So there's 3 tiers to lending that I've come up with here, right? The first and the bottom tier, the bulk of the tier, is transactional lending. And what this stands for, we're going to break all of these down. EMD, down payment, holding costs. That is transactional lending. Again, we're going to cover all of these. The second tier is private money lending. Now, I just want to verify something here. If you're lending money in general, you're basically labeling yourself as a private money lender, even if it's transactional lending. But when I refer to someone being a private money lender, I really refer to them funding the entirety of my deal. So they're funding the purchase price and they're funding the renovation costs. So if I buy a house and it costs me $100,000 to buy it for round number purposes, and it costs me $50,000 to renovate it, I am going to a private money lender and I'm saying, hey, can you fund me $150,000? That's basically what I'm saying, right? So that's the second tier. That's private money lending. And then this third tier, which is at the top of the pyramid here, is involvement in the deal, right? And what I mean by involvement in the deal is I mean any of the above, whether that's funding the entirety of the deal, or that's funding the EMD or the down payment or just holding costs. And by funding that amount of money, those funds, you are getting some sort of percentage of ownership or equity into the deal. Any questions on these before we cover them all in detail? I'm going to cover them all in detail right now. Cool. All right, let's start with EMD. What is EMD? EMD stands for earnest money deposit, and it's needed to get a property under contract. I'll give you guys an instance. We just went under contract on a property about 2 weeks ago. The down payment on that to just get that property under contract was $2,000. The reason that is because it's basically good skin. What's that word? Not good skin. It's like skin in the game money, right? Basically, the seller's saying, hey, I'm going to sell you this property. I want to know that you're serious. You need to put a couple $1,000s down just to show me that you're serious, right? So that's what earnest money deposit is. Now, sometimes it's refundable depending on how the contract is set up, but a lot of times in off market, it's not refundable unless there's an issue with title. And that's all things that you can negotiate out. But now here's what I want you guys to understand. So if we're looking at this from a lending perspective, I'm an investor. I need to put $2,000 down as an earnest money deposit. Why would I need to put that money down, right? Why would an investor need to? Tying up earnest money deposits can be a nuisance because it's illiquid until closing. operate, especially for myself, just a backstory of 37 properties. We have a lot of money moving around all day long. I do not like to tie up any money in a prison for 30 plus days, right? Whether that's for down payments or EMD, all of those things. And a lot of investors are like that. There's a lot of, velocity of money going on. So investors like myself, I've raised money for EMD. I'll say, hey, I need $2,000 for this deal. Who wants to send it over? And I'll give them a return based off of it, right? So again, how much is needed for something like this could vary. Usually, most common, it's anywhere between $1,000 to $10,000. If you're buying $1 million property, it's definitely going to be high. It's going to be maybe even higher than $10,000. If you're buying a $100,000 property, it might be $1,000, $2,000. So that all kind of varies. What do returns look like? This is where, whenever I ask this question, when it comes to private money, this can vary in a bunch of different ways. The private money lender could say, hey, I want 10% for this. And the investor could say, well, I'm willing to give 5. Everything's negotiable here. So you have to just understand that and take it with a grain of salt. But on average, for what I give and what for most people see and what they give, about a 10 to 20% return. And how long is the return usually taken to be earned? Usually when it comes to earnest money deposits, you get that return when the property closes. So for example, if I'm under contract on a deal and the close date is December 20th, and Roman sends me $2,000 as an earnest money deposit, on December 20th, I close that deal. I send Roman back his earnest money deposit of $2,000 with let's just say we had a 20% return. He gets a 20% return, which if my mental math is correct, I think it's like $400, right? So I could be wrong on that, but that's how that EMD structure works. Is there any questions on that? Cool. Let's talk about down payment, right? So we're going to kind of build up the tier a little bit here. So down payment money, what is a down payment, right? And again, this might sound rhetorical, but it's an amount of money needed to close on a property. Why would an investor need it? Very similarly to what I said last time, but even on a bigger scale, they might not have that much liquid in their account, depending on how much money's moving around and where they are on other deals that they have going on. Also, maybe not wanting to tie up funds. That's a big one, right? Again, we don't like, especially myself, personally, I'll put myself in this boat. I hate having money tied up in deals. It's too much to the real con to real estate is that it's illiquid. That's really the only con. If I need money and I'm in a pinch and it's tied up in a house, it's going to take me 30 days to access that money. So I don't like to have any of my money necessarily tied up in houses, especially if I know I have a lot of things going on. So for me, it might make sense for me to raise that down payment just as it will for a lot of other investors. And again, we always look at opportunity cost. If I'm going to put $20,000 into a deal, that $20,000 is not accessible to me at that point anymore. So I want to make sure that I have it if I need it. How much is needed? Again, usually this will vary, but it will usually depend between 10 to 25% of the purchase price plus closing costs. So for round numbers, $100,000 purchase, let's just say, the investor is getting a 10% down payment. That's $10,000. Let's just say closing costs is an extra $6,000. That's $16,000 that's needed for the down payment. What do returns look like? Again, all of this is always negotiable, but 10 to 30%. Usually because the money's tied up a little bit longer, you're going to get a higher return on something like this versus like an EMD, kind of transaction. And again, that number 5 there, how long until the return is earned? Usually when the property is sold or refinanced. That's a big difference here. So with the EMD, you're usually seeing a return, when the property closes on a purchase. Whereas here, the property, you're not going to get your return back usually until it's sold or refinanced. Now, again, all of this is negotiable, right? So if you give $15,000, you might turn around and you might say, hey, I want a monthly interest payment. All of this is negotiable. You have every right to demand something like that or to request something like that, I should say. But most of the time, investors will say, hey, look, like you're kind of taking a back seat. Once we refinance this or we sell it, we'll give you your full, deposit back with the return. Any questions on that? All right, I'm going to show you guys an example. And my cousins aren't on the call, but they were involved in this deal with me. My partner Steve and I, we bought this property for $112,000. The down payment that was needed, we used a hard money loan. It's a type of short-term lender. The down payment that was needed was $26,733.79. We had a renovation budget of about $45,000, which the lender was funding, so we didn't need any money there. And when we finished the job, the property appraised for $275,000. We had a cash out refinance of $47,529.68. And this allowed us to pay back that down payment, which was that $26,733.79. And they got a 30% return on this. So they ended up getting $34,000 back. Now, this was over the course of about 6.5 months. So if you actually categorize that on a year over year basis, they're making a 60% return, right? If they were to double that, it would be a 60% return, which is obviously unheard of anywhere now. So from that perspective, it worked out great. We definitely needed the funds. We bought this back in April. We were short on cash at that moment. So that was very, very helpful for us. And it worked out nicely. They got a good deal out of it and everybody made money on it, which was nice. These were the HUDs, the purchase price, $26,000 down. And this was the cash out on the back end of $47,500. But again, they don't always go this way, right? And I think that's very important. You got to understand that there's always going to be risk involved. And we're going to talk about that in a second. The third one, the final one for transactional lending is holding costs. So holding cost is the funds that are needed to sustain the project. Okay. So just think about like when you have a property that you're renovating, you have a lender that funded the deal. You owe them interest payments every month. You still have to pay for utilities because you have the gas running, especially in the winter. You have the electric on, you got the water going, and then you also have insurance, right? So you have to make sure that the property is in good shape, it's staying on, in place and everything like that. So every single month, your holding costs could run a decent amount. I mean, the flip that we just closed, our holding costs were roughly, $2,100 every single month. So if it's a 6-month project, you're looking at $12,000 that you need to be prepared for. This is another example of, where we'll use people who have some money and, all investors do this, in regards to if they need it. People that want to be involved in the deal, they'll fund some money every single month for the holding costs. And once the, property is either sold or refinanced or whatever the case might be, they get a return on that. So that's just what holding costs are. Again, why would investors need it? Again, guys, the same answer here. Illiquidity, they don't want to tie up funds, opportunity cost to use those funds in other places. How much is needed? This all depends on the loan amount. Again, if it's a higher loan amount, they're going to have a higher interest payment. If it's a lower loan amount, they're going to have a lower interest payment. So that's all going to depend. Returns on this could still be in that 10 to 30% range, although 30% on holding costs is probably a bit high on this. And then how long till return is earned? Usually similar situation here with the down payment when the property is sold or refinanced. But again, all of that is negotiable. You could absolutely negotiate that out. Jack could come to me and say, hey, I'm going to give you $5,000 for your holding costs over the next 3 months, but I want a 10% return every single month. So you're sending me, whatever amount that is, $70 a month or whatever it might be. Any questions on that? Cool. So you want to be a private money lender, right? So what is a private money lender? Oh, hold on one second, guys. What is a private money lender? Right now, listen, if you lend, again, like I said, if you're transactionally lending, you are kind of a private money lender just in general. But again, private money, when I think of private money, I'm thinking of someone who funds the deal in its entirety, right? They're lending on the purchase price, they're lending on the renovation, and they lend those funds. It's someone who's looking to invest. I think I might have a typo here. Someone who has funds. Oh, I'm sorry. No, someone who has funds who's looking to invest in them, and they lend those funds to investors to buy real estate. That's basically just the definition of a private money lender. What are the qualifications of a private money lender? Here's the trick. There are no real qualifications. All you really need is just money to lend. If you have money to lend, congratulations, you're going to be a private money lender if you want to be. Do you need an attorney? It is highly recommended that you get an attorney to help you. Pat and Allison aren't on this call. Like I mentioned, they were dealing with some stuff, but they recently became a private money lender. And I connected them with an attorney of mine that I've worked with in the past, and he formed their LLC. He created their loan docs and he assisted them on the first closing. So you very much, if you're going to be a private money lender, you very much want to use an attorney. I would say it's absolutely crucial. And I would never suggest to anybody not to use one if you were going to be a private. So what are the pros to being a private money lender? You could set your rates. Okay, this, and again, same with transactional lending. This is always negotiable. You could say, hey, I want 2 points and 10% interest. Just a heads up, points means like percentage on the total loan. So if you were to lend $100,000 and you requested 2 points, you would get $2,000 up front just for initiating that. Does that make sense? I know that could be confusing, but this is very important if you're going to be a private money lender. You want to know because points is really how you make a big bulk of your money. 10% interest is what you're requesting every single month as an interest installment payment. But again, like I said, it's totally up to you. Like Brandon could come out of the gate and say, yo, I want 5 points and 50% interest, right? That's completely up to him and how he decides to go about it. Whether I take that or not is a totally different, question. You set your criteria. This is a big one as well, right? So if Brittany was like, hey, I'm going to be a private money lender and I want to lend to you, she could turn around and say, cool. If you need funds, I have them. I can lend them. but I want to know what your credit score is. I want to do a background check on you to make sure you're not a criminal. I want to know that you also have a W-2 job. So just in case this property goes south, you could still make the installment payments. And I want to know that, you have a clean house. And I threw that in there as like a joke, right? Like you could really require anything, right? That's kind of how it works because it's your funds. You're determining who you want to lend to. So again, that's all up to you. Like my private money lender, Josh, he's my main guy. I've been working with him so much that we're at a point where he doesn't request anything from me. And even before we got into it, he didn't request anything from me, which again, that was totally his call on how he goes about that. But that's totally up to you and in regards to how you want to kind of qualify someone before you go through them. I think the biggest thing that you want to look at personally is experience. If they have prior experience, that speaks more volume than really anything else, in my opinion. But you also don't want to lend money to a criminal. So if you want to do a background check, I think that's smart too. Here is a pro about private money lending as well. There is collateral. And the collateral is you get into a first lien position on the home, right? So when you lend to somebody to buy the property, you become the first lien position holder. Here's where there's a big caveat in the other forms of lending. Transactional lending and the like EMD, the down payment, the holding costs, you're never going to be in a first lien position on those unless they bought the property in cash. And if they bought the property in cash, they really didn't need you probably for any of those things. But you're never going to be in a first position lien. Now, you could put together like a promissory note. You could have them sign it. You could get that notarized. That's all very prudent and should be done. But at the end of the day, like you can't be in a position where if they don't pay you back your earnest money deposit, you're taking their house. Like it's never going to get to that point. With private money lending, where you're lending the entirety of the deal, that's the point that it gets to. If the payments don't get made, you could take control of the property, right? They go into default and you could foreclose. Again, nobody ever wants that to happen. The operator doesn't want that to happen. The lender doesn't want that to happen either. You're not going to want that to happen, but at least there's some backing to the funds that you're putting out. Strong returns on average, you're getting about 20% year over year. And again, you might hear that and be like, well, the example that you just showed, your cousins are getting 60% year over year. And that's absolutely true. But at the same time, their money is at a lot more risk because it's not backed. And when you have higher risk, there's got to be higher return, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't take on the increased risk. So the fact that they're getting a 60% year over year is awesome, but they're taking on more risk because they really have no control and they have nothing to back those funds. All that's backing them is really me as the operator in that example. Any questions on any of this? I know we're moving pretty fast here. I see a few more people joined. Thank you, guys. All right, so what are the cons of private money lending? You need a lot of funds to get started typically, right? If you're going to lend on a full deal, you're going to need a decent amount of funds, right? Depending on who the operator is and what kind of, deal they're sending you. But most loans are going to be over $100,000. And again, because if you're buying a house, in my area that I buy in, there are some cheap properties. But I don't think I've maybe two deals out of the 37 that we closed that were less than $100,000 in total loan amount. Because even if you're buying a house for $50,000, it's probably a pretty beat up property that's going to need a lot of work and renovations, right? So it's hard to say that you're going to get anything under 100 grand. And if you're going to be, big time baller in Staten Island and lend to other people in Staten Island, you're probably looking at like a mill, right? So you're going to have a lot of money either saved up, or you're going to have to build a lot of connections to raise that money to lend out, which we can make a whole nother topic conversation on that. Another con on this is you don't have much control. And what I mean by that is, yes, you have control over the property if anything were to go south, but you don't necessarily have control in regards to how the process goes, right? So if I am a private money lender and I'm lending the money out, like I said in the very beginning when we talked through the strategy board, you don't have to deal with project management. You don't have to deal with property management. But that also means that you have no control over those things. So you're really putting all of the control into the operator to execute on the plan. What happens if the operator fails? We just briefly talked about this. You now have possession of the property, which is a good thing, but you also have to do the work, right? So you need to either, get that property finished through renovation to sell it, or you need to deal with the problem tenant who wasn't paying, and that's why the operator defaulted, to, have to get that tenant out and then get that property sold or whatever the case might be. So you kind of might fall into a little bit of a situation that you did not want to be in. So it's very important that you understand that before getting into it. And the last thing is there are going to be some upfront legal fees, right? Like we talked about using an attorney. The upfront legal fees are probably going to be anywhere between $1,000 to $5,000. So that's something that you'll just have to kind of prepare for before you become a private money lender, because you want to make sure you have everything set in place and in order before you move into it. Any questions on that? All right, last one on this, guys. We're moving through. Involvement in the deal, right? And I threw up the Jordan and the Pippen. And again, I'm not out here like the biggest basketball guy or even sports guy, so I don't want to be out here like knowing I know all of Jordan's stats, but I just couldn't use LeBron. That was really where I got it. I was like, I can't use LeBron, so I got to go Jordan on something like this. Maybe I should have went like Carmelo and Stoudemire or something, right? I know Brandon likes that. All right, or maybe Brunson and Kat right now. Maybe Carmela, I see her on the call. You'd probably like that too. All right, so what does involvement look like when it comes to, being involved in a particular deal that you lend on, right? So you put up the funds, and in return, you get a percentage of the equity and the ownership in the deal. So why would you want to do this, right? So let's just say, kind of bringing it back, you have the funds, but you don't maybe have the time or the experience, but you want to build wealth long term. And again, when you do these transactional deals, down payment, EMD, or you're a private money lender full out and you're lending the entirety of the deal, there's a lot of pros to that. But most of the time, you're paid out on a refinance or when they sell the property. There's no long-term generational wealth piece that comes along with it. And that's very, very crucial to really understand. Armando, thanks for that. I appreciate it, bro. Thanks for jumping on. God bless, brother. Happy Thanksgiving. So in regards to that, right, obviously we're in this position. Can everybody still see my screen? I'm sorry. Okay, cool. We talk about building generational wealth, right? That's a big part of Rosary and Real Estate. So we obviously, we want to make money through real estate investing, but we don't necessarily want to put ourselves in a position where we're boxing ourselves out and not getting that generational wealth piece. So when you get an involvement in the deal, that helps with that generational wealth, because now you have a portion in that deal in perpetuity, right? Or at least an annuity until you guys decide to, bail out. Number 3, is this a good idea? Well, it can be, right? But you want to make sure you iron out the details prior to entering into the deal. This is very important. I think a lot of people get very hyped up about just jumping into a deal and getting it rocking. And again, I am an action person. One of my good mentors said, you really just need to know steps 1, 2, and 3, and then you'll figure out 4, 5, 6, and 7 on the back end. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you iron out the details before you enter into a partnership, because a partnership in business is a lot like a marriage, right? Now, it's a contract. It's not really a covenant like a marriage is, as we all know on this call. But at the same time, there is a lot that is involved in that. So you want to make sure you really understand it before getting into. You also want to make sure you're comfortable entering into a partnership that can be long-term. Like I mentioned, if this is going to be a long-term hold property and you have plans to hold this for the next 5, 10, 15 to, infinite years and pass it down, you want to make sure that you're in a good partnership with someone who shares and equal values with you and they bring the opposite of what you're bringing to the table. If you both have funds, but you don't have experience, it's honestly not going to be that great of a partnership. You want to partner up with somebody that has the experience, you have the funds, or vice versa, and that's going to lead to a good partnership. Me and my partner, Steve, I have more of the business acumen. I have more of the operational experience, more of the acquisition experience. He has more of the contracting experience. He had contractor relationships. That's why him and I meshed so well, and we were able to build kind of what we built here. All right, let's see. Can I still go through? That's what I think. Sorry, guys. Give me 1 second. You guys all still see my screen, right? Okay. All right, thank you. All right, here's an example of involvement in the deal. You invest, you put $25,000 down in a down payment. Your partner runs the operation, right? They're scheduling the contractors, ensuring the work gets done. They're searching for the tenant. They're putting the tenant in place. They're managing the tenant. They're working with the lenders. They're doing all of those, back end, high end operational aspects to it. And then after the refinance hits, you get your $25,000 back, God willing, right? Like hopefully it was a good deal. And then let's just say you have a 50% partnership where you receive 50% of the net cash flow every month until the property is sold. That's a perfect example of kind of how you could be a lender and be involved in the deal. And that gives you kind of that, generational wealth piece as well. And you could also get a return on the back end for the down payment as well if you kind of work that into your deal also. All right, any questions on any of the real estate investing stuff? We blew through that in we've been going on for about 40 minutes now. So we moved through, that was a lot of information that we kind of water hosed that. Does anybody have any questions on any of that stuff?
So does the attorney work out the contract, or is that between you and who you're lending to?
Yeah, so in regards to like the rate and terms,
Right. Rate
Yeah.
and terms and yeah, basically.
Rate and terms is going to be distinguished between you and who you're lending to. Attorney doesn't determine that stuff. Yep. Correct. Yes. So basically, if you want to be a private money lender, let's just say, you're going to go to an attorney, you're going to say, hey, I want to be a private money lender. I need an LLC for asset protection. I need the loan documents, which is going to basically be a template, right? And that template is going to be you're going to be able to use that for any deal that you fund in the future. Okay. But when you have an actual deal that's coming up and you have a closing that's going to occur, you work with your attorney to really kind of fill that template out to make sure it is specific to the rate and terms and all the details that you're putting in for that particular deal. So basically, you'll say, "Hey, I'm lending, to Roman, and Roman, I'm going to give him, 2 points and 10% interest. So the $100,000 loan that I'm going to lend to him, I'm going to get $2,000 for initiating that loan, and then every single month, Roman's going to give me a 10% interest payment, and I want to make sure that we have all of those details written down in the loan docs." The attorney's going to put all of that together, but the rate and terms are going to be established between you and Roman before you enter in.
Understood. Thank you.
Great question. Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. All right. Well, let's keep it moving. All right, guys. My personal favorite. Now we're going to get into it. Although I love talking about, the real estate side of things. I very much enjoy talking about the Rosary. Equally, I would say even more. So the promises of the Rosary given to us by our Blessed Mother. Has anyone heard of the 15 promises before? I know we have a few diehard Rosary guys on this, so I'm curious to know if you guys heard about this.
Heard of it, but don't memorize them.
I actually haven't, so.
Okay, nice. Roman, that's good to know. Roman, when I saw you on this call, I was like, oh, my boy Roman, he knows about this. So that's good. I was unaware of this as well. I'm pretty sure I heard about this in the Secret of the Rosary book. I can't fully remember if that's where I grasped it, or you know what? It might not have been in that. It might have been in Champions of the Rosary by Father Calloway, which is a sick book, long book, like 400 pages, but it goes through the entire history of the Rosary for like 10 centuries. And then it goes through saints of the Rosary and why to pray the Rosary. It's really, really detailed on that. And I'm pretty sure that's where I heard about this. But basically, the promises of the Rosary were given to us by our Blessed Mother Mary to Saint Dominic. And I'll just give everybody a quick little backstory here. Saint Dominic, 12th century saint, was a preacher. He formed the Dominican order, which is the order of preachers, and he was going around fighting a cult called the Albigensians. And the Albigensians were these, cult people that were basically saying that the flesh is totally evil, everything about this world is evil, and everything that you do is a bad thing. And I'm sure it was probably even a lot more intense, but basically because they were saying all of this, the suicide rate was like going through the roof. And St. Dominic was fighting against this, and he was having a lot of trouble fighting against it. And our Blessed Mother Mary visited him and gave him the rosary and said, this is going to be the weapon that you are going to be using, and how you're going to convert all of these souls that you have been tirelessly trying to convert. And after that, St. Dominic started going around preaching the Marian Psalter. That's what it initially was kind of called. And the conversion was out of control. And he fought through the Albigensian cult, won that battle. And then for centuries and centuries on, it has continued to still be the weapon of choice in the Catholic world. And why the Rosary is so powerful, we're going to break this down. But really, what it is you get a lot of pushback about the Rosary, and people say, well, the Rosary wasn't in the Bible. And it's true, but the Bible is in the Rosary, right? So the Rosary, as we've seen it, and everybody knows it, we've talked about it all the time here, obviously. But every single one of these, this centerpiece here and these beads here, these middle beads, they're all mysteries. And in those mysteries, we talk about an event that happened in Jesus and Mary's life, and we reflect on it, right? And that's why it brings about this level of virtue that you could grow in by praying the Rosary. And what makes this even better is we're going to talk about why to pray the Rosary, but then we're going to get into the promises of the Rosary that the Mother of God literally gave St. Dominic, that we could take, true comfort in knowing that she's backing us, and that if we pray a Rosary, like, this is what's going to happen. So we're going to get into this. I'm very excited. So why you should pray the Rosary. I pulled these 10. These are actually from St. Louis de Montfort, and this is directly from the book, The Secret of the Rosary. So whoever wins this in the giveaway, you're going to see this in the book. But I don't want to get too in the weeds on these 10. I'll kind of quickly plug this. I did in the Rosary and Real Estate 21-day challenge, understanding and praying the rosary. This is like day 5, I think it is, that I go through this and I go into detail on these 10. So if you want to, that's on the Frankie D'Astoli Show podcast. That's on the Rosary and Real Estate school page. That's on YouTube. You could go back and you can hit on those and you'll get a little bit more detail on all of these. But this is basically what Louis de Montfort says. These are the 10 reasons why you should pray the rosary. Number 1, he says sinners are forgiven. And again, I talk about this in more depth, but sin is something that is not nearly talked about enough in this world. We live in a very, pleasing world of do what you feel is right. And, it's okay. It's okay to be, you just have to be a good person. You could do bad things, but as long as you're a good person in heart, that's all fugazi. That's all, the devil's tactics to make you not realize exactly what you're doing. And sin needs to be talked about a lot more. And by, what St. Louis de Montfort says here, when you pray the rosary, sinners are forgiven. And of course, we have confession. We have a lot of other great, aspects to go to in regards to forgiveness, but the rosary is a great opportunity there. Number 2, souls that thirst are refreshed. And I think about the woman at the well who goes to the well in the gospel, and she's continuously trying to get water out of this well. And Christ comes to her and says, you are drinking this water and you will be thirsty again, but I am the everlasting water, right? And I'm botching that. It's not exactly how he said it, but by praying the rosary, that thirst is refreshed. It's quenched. Those who are fettered have their bonds broken. I had to look up what fettered meant again, because I had to look it up the first time that I did that talk. But basically it means that you're bonded basically at the ankles. So when you feel like you're trapped in bonds, those bonds are broken by praying the rosary. Those who weep find happiness. Those who are tempted find peace. I think that's so big. There's so much temptation. Literally, the Apple iPhone is called the apple, right? It's like the apple from the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve ate that apple. Like literally temptation is in our hand at all time. Instead of an Apple iPhone in your hand, put a rosary in your hand. You'll have a lot more peace. The poor find help. I think that's very important as well. The religious are reformed. That's a big one, especially in today's world where we live in such this kind of modernized cultural Catholic world, cultural Christian world. I don't need to go to mass. I don't need to receive the Eucharist. I just need to, say that I love God and be a good person. Again, the religious are reformed through the rosary, and I can attest to that truthfully by myself. Those who are ignorant are instructed. I think that's funny. I think there's a lot of ignorance in the world today. I think St. Louis de Montfort called that out back in the 16th century, and I think he'd be even saying it even louder right now in the 21st century. The living learn to overcome pride. Pride is the origin of sin. If you look at the story of Lucifer, he wanted to be like God. And now, he enters into the garden. He's thrown down by St. Michael. In the garden, he tempts Adam and Eve. He tells them if they eat this forbidden fruit, they will see as God sees. They eat it. And of course, what happens? That's the start of original sin. Pride is where this all originated. And I think all of us within ourselves have pride that we don't even realize. And the rosary will help you understand it. It will help you overcome it. And the last one that St. Louis de Montfort gives us is the dead, the holy souls, have their pains eased by suffering. November is the month of the dead, right? It starts off with, all, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sorry, I'm botching this. All saints and then all souls, right? Or is it all souls and all saints? All souls and all saints. So it starts off with all souls, right? Somebody correct me there if I'm wrong. I think I'm right on that. I'm pretty sure I'm right on that. I'll take that. I'll take silence as I'm right on that. All souls, right? November is the month of the dead. When you offer up your rosary, there's a lot of good things that happen from offering it up. But ultimately, I've seen a few chats in here. Yep. All saints, all souls. Oh, that's my wife. Thanks, honey. Appreciate it. It's the month of the dead. So when you're praying your rosary, you always want to offer it up for, the souls, especially in purgatory, the souls in purgatory. And we could get into that. I don't want to get too much into detail there, but, when you're praying the rosary, these souls that are stuck in purgatory, if you offer up your rosary for them, they have their pains eased, and they, have a quicker access to heaven. All right, cool. So here's what I'm going to do real fast in the chat, because I don't want to forget this. Can I access my chat here? I am going to drop this in, and I want to see if you guys could get this. If you can't, then I will add it to the Rosary and Real Estate school page right after. But I want to see if you guys could get this, if I'm able to add this into the chat here. It doesn't look like I'm going to be able to add it, unfortunately. So I will drop that into the school page after this. But this is here, and I put the 5 that we're going to pull from. But I found this article. And again, in the Rare 21 Day Challenge, I break down all 15 of these promises. But I found this article that explains these promises, and I'm going to be totally honest with you guys. After reading this, I was on a new level for praying the rosary that I've never been on, because it's like, this isn't, when we're talking about this isn't me giving you guys any promises. This isn't, even Pope Leo right now giving you any promises. This isn't, Saint Padre Pio, who's one of my favorite saints, giving you promises. This is the Mother of God who says these 15 promises and is telling you, she's not, saying this could happen. She's telling you that this will happen if you pray the rosary devoutly. And I'm even just thinking about it, I'm getting chills because it's just so wild to think about. But it's so incentivizing to pray the rosary. And again, I understand some people are going to say 20 minutes, it's hard sometimes, for people who aren't used to praying for 2 minutes. I can understand where you're coming from, but that's why it's so fruitful, right? It requires discipline. It requires devotion. It requires you to block off time to be in the presence of Jesus and Mary. And that's why we push the rosary so much, because I know for a fact, and I know so many people on this call will attest to this, the rosary is, outside of the Eucharist, in my opinion, the best asset that we have to get to heaven. It brings you through the life of Jesus and Mary. It's just so amazing. Martino, thanks so much for jumping on. I appreciate it, brother. All right, so let's just get into the 15 promises. And again, I'll throw this article in there, and we're not going to get through all 15. I picked, I believe it's 5, maybe 6 on here that we're going to kind of roll through. So the first one is this one. This is promise number 1. And I felt like promise number 1 was very important because of the fact that it's the very first promise. We should look at that and be observant of why it's the first promise. So it says, whosoever shall faithfully serve me by the recitation of the rosary shall receive signal graces. Now, as it describes in the description here, signal graces are those special and unique graces which help sanctify us in our state of life. And St. Louis de Montfort adds from his book, True Devotion of Mary, that Our Lady is the fastest way to union with our Lord, right? And we've talked about this on the last Rosary and Real Estate, where we talked about how Mary is kind of that light, that flashlight that you're holding in a dark tunnel. You see the light at the end of the tunnel and you know that's Christ, but you can't see what's right in front of you. You don't know if you're going to fall off a cliff, or you're going to step, in a ditch, or, there's a lion standing in front of you. You don't know these things, but Mary's that flashlight that you're holding, that you're able to see in front of you, and she guides you on that path to Christ. And by praying that rosary, the recitation of the rosary, you're going to receive those significant graces which help with sanctifying your soul. So that's the first one, which I felt was an absolute banger. And honestly, I think they get better as we go. Number 4, so we're jumping a little bit ahead here, but it says, it will cause good works to flourish. It will obtain for souls the abundant mercy of God. It will withdraw the hearts of men from the love of the world and its vanities, and will lift them to the desire for eternal things. Oh, that souls would sanctify themselves by these means. Let's break this down here, right? Good works will flourish, okay? It will obtain for souls the abundant mercy of God. Let's talk about that, right? So by praying the rosary, you are going to get the abundant mercy from God. That's super important to understand. This is my personal favorite of this one. It will withdraw the hearts of men from the love of the world and its vanities. What did we talk about in the beginning of this call, right? We talked about why Rosary and Real Estate was established was to strive to build generational wealth, but more importantly, that spiritual poverty, which will help us detach from the assets that we're accumulating and keep our eyes fixed on heaven. Praying the rosary does that. It literally helps you detach from those worldly things, from the vanity. So if we are going to buy houses, if we're going to build real estate wealth, generational wealth, we need to pray the rosary. It's going to help us with spiritual poverty. And it will lift them to the desire for eternal things, like we had just mentioned. And it says, oh, that souls would sanctify themselves by this means. And the little kind of thing in here says, this promise, along with the previous ones, is a promise to help to live in virtue. We know that by praying the rosary, we grow in virtue. Becoming holy is not only avoiding sin, but growing in virtue. And I think one of the best things that I heard when, I forgot who was saying this, but he said, how do you know you're growing in holiness? You know you're growing in holiness when you look back on some things that you did that were sins, and you feel a sense of regret and this sense of kind of loss and disruption with relationship with God. And I think when you pray the rosary and you grow in this virtue, you grow in that understanding of what sin is, and you realize just kind of how grotesque and disgust it can be. Number 6, whosoever shall recite the rosary devoutly, applying himself to the consideration of its sacred mysteries, shall never be conquered by misfortune. God will not chastise him in his justice. He shall not perish by an unprovided death. If he be just, he shall remain in the grace of God and become worthy of eternal life. Let's read what the little passage on this one says. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. It says, this promise highlights the magnitude of the graces that the rosary brings to whoever prays it. One will draw down God's mercy rather than his justice and will have a final chance to repent. See Promise 7. One will not be conquered by misfortune means that Our Lady will obtain for the person sufficient graces to handle said misfortune, i.e., carrying the cross allowed by God, without falling into despair. As sacred scripture tells us, for my yoke is sweet and my burden light. I think there's just so much that you can unpack in there. One thing that this reminds me of is in the Secret of the Rosary, the St. Louis de Montfort book. He talks about there was a priest, I forgot who it was in the book. It might have been Blessed Alan de la Roche, but I don't think it was. I think it was actually a king. And the king carried around with him a big rosary that he wore on his belt, but he never prayed it. It's quite interesting. And he has this vision where he's dying. And our Blessed Mother goes up to him and she's holding a like a justice scale. And on one side of the scale is all his sins and it's dragging it down significantly. And then on the other side of the scale, she puts the big rosary that he was carrying on his waist on it, and it totally tilts the scale. And because he carried it, he influenced a lot of people to recite it. And her message to him was, because you did that, God's mercy is coming upon you and you're going to live. However, you should be praying your rosary every single day if you want salvation. And from that moment on, he prayed the rosary every single day. So that's one that I pulled from that. And then I think a big one on this that's really awesome is this life, it's going to be filled with challenges. We know that, right? I think every single person on this call has the crosses that they're carrying. And that's part of life, right? Christ, literally God himself, died, suffered, was, mocked and brutally crucified on a cross. Who are we to not have suffering in this life? That's just how it always works. But those sufferings are hard. And our Blessed Mother is saying here that, those misfortunes are going to happen. But if you continue to pray the rosary, I will be with you through all of those, which I think is very beautiful. I think this is, all right, we got two more, guys. So this is number 10. The faithful children of the rosary shall merit a high degree of glory in heaven. This promise is a logical consequence of promises 3 and 4. Since anyone who truly lives a holier life on earth will obtain a higher place in heaven, the closer one is to God while on living on earth, the closer that the person will be to him in heaven. The Catechism of the Catholic Church states spiritual progress tends toward ever more union with Christ. I think this is so big, and I think a lot of people don't realize this, right? I think a lot of people think, I go to heaven, right? I'm a good person. I'm going to go to heaven. And then I'm just going to be kind of with everybody else in heaven and we're all going to be equal. Now, I want to be careful in what I say there because, when you are in heaven, there is equality in regards to the union you have with God, right? You are in a total purified state, as is everyone in heaven. But what this is saying here, which is extremely logical, is if you lived a more holy and devout life on earth and you were close with Christ on earth, and you go to heaven, you will have a higher degree of glory in heaven. And I think of this in the sense of like a king and a queen's court, right? It's like, or even better, maybe a better explanation of this is like, they say heaven is like a wedding banquet, right? Well, when you have a wedding and you have a bride and a groom, usually there's groomsmen and there's bridesmaids, right? And those people are in a degree closer to the bride and the groom. So I think that's very logical to think about. If I live a life where I'm devoted to the bride, to the groom here on earth, when I go to heaven, I'm going to hold a higher place than the other guests at the banquet. And I think this promise is just one of those things that emphasizes that. And if you pray your rosary every single day, if you block out that 20 minutes or even longer to really focus and pray it devoutly, you are earning yourself additional spiritual progress towards that path of heaven. And the last one, you shall obtain all you ask of me by recitation of the rosary. All right. I'm going to repeat that one more time. You shall obtain all you ask of me by the recitation of the rosary. This promise emphasizes Our Lady's role as our advocate and mediatrix of all graces. Of course, all requests are subject to God's most perfect will. God will always grant our request if it is beneficial for our soul, and Our Lady will only intercede for us when our request is good for our salvation. I think that's very, very important to understand, right? If you go and pray your rosary tonight and you're like, oh man, I really hope for a great deal where I can make 50K on it, that might not necessarily be the best for your salvation, right? And you might not necessarily get it. So you don't want to necessarily do that. But when you're praying that rosary and you're asking for something, and it's good for your salvation, it's good for your path to holiness, our Blessed Mother is saying that she will make sure that you receive it, which I think is beautiful. And an interesting side note on that one, I've actually used this a couple weeks ago. So before this event was supposed to be 2 weeks ago, before I got sick, a couple nights before that, my son Francis was he was having a rough night, right? Like the kid was crying nonstop, and he wasn't eating, which was very, very bizarre because Francis usually eats 6-7 times a night. The kid's like a house. So he wasn't eating, and it was getting a little bit weird. And it was happening when he was going to bed. He wasn't eating, and it continued throughout the night. He would wake up, he would cry, and Christina was trying to feed him, and he wasn't eating. And it was like 3 a.m. and I was definitely getting a little bit concerned. And I said, you know what? I'm exhausted, but I'm going to pray the rosary right now, and I'm going to ask for our Blessed Mother to help my son in this situation. So I pray the rosary. Shortly after that, he wakes up, he's crying, and he starts eating. And again, all that to say, listen, not the most biggest thing of all time, but when you're thinking in that sense and you're doing it in a sense of humility and you're coming from a good position and you offer up your rosary for something like that, our Blessed Mother hears it and she always answers. So just a little side note on that. But that is, oh my gosh, I had one more, guys. I'm sorry, I didn't even realize. I have so many of these. Like I said, I was going on a tangent when I was in here putting this all together. Last one. All who recite the rosary are my sons and brothers of my only Son, Jesus Christ. Since the rosary is a most excellent prayer focused on Jesus and his life and activities in salvation history, it brings us closer to our Lord and Our Lady. Doctrinally, Our Lady is our mother and Jesus is our older brother, besides being our God. Yes, Holy Trinity, Jesus Christ. And when we recite the rosary, we are sons of Mary and brothers of Jesus Christ. Any questions on the promises of the rosary? Did anybody find that interesting? Did we like them? How are we feeling?
Beautiful,
Great job,
amazing.
Frankie.
I love it. It contextualizes like the discipline, right? That you need to carry on in everything that you do in your life. If I have the discipline to do the rosary and I'm afforded these promises, I'm going to have the discipline in business, in my spirituality, in how I conduct myself. I'm not going to skimp. I'm going to take the time. And it just all ties together both metaphysically and actually. So I really like that breakdown.
No doubt. I appreciate that, bro. I appreciate that detailed response. Thank you. Awesome. Well, closing remarks on this, guys, and then we're going to get into I'm going to catch up on your podcast episode so I can learn more about the promises. Thank you, Teresa. I appreciate that. Closing remarks on this before we get into our group rosary for the night. Pray the rosary by Real Estate. That's obviously a standard in this group. Join the Rare community. If you guys haven't joined it already, please do. The school community, we're really trying to blow that up. We're at 84 members, trying to get to 100 by the end of this year for sure. Ideally, we'd like to be more. Invite your friends and family to the community. Please spread the word. I'd very much appreciate it. Here's the Venmo, guys, if you'd like to. Again, we raised $184.50 last month, which is awesome. The month before that, we raised a little over 200, and we did have a higher turnout last month. Now, this is never a pressure thing to donate to Good Counsel Homes. But it's a great community, and especially this time of year with, Advent coming up and, obviously Christmas, where a lot of focus on getting gifts for people and all of that stuff. It's a reminder that there's a lot of people out there that are going through some stuff. They're carrying their crosses, and we could definitely, if we can, always do our part to help those people as well. So Frank D'Astoli on the Venmo to donate, just write Good Counsel Homes. Don't send any donations for Rare Community this month. Let's just focus on this month and next month, being donations to Good Counsel and to other, organizations that we put out there. Be on the lookout for the next sign-up link. That'll be coming up. And the Advent Challenge is coming up as well, which will be posted in the school community. Any questions, guys? Any last-minute questions? All right, cool. I'm going to stop the screen share here. Everybody's good here. All right, cool. So if there's no questions, I would like to just get the group rosary going. It's 7:50, which we're really actually making some phenomenal time here. because usually we start the group rosary around 8 o'clock. So we're going to do the group rosary